Taiwan, I'm Ethan Liu with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Rights groups say Taiwan isn't doing enough to stop the abuse of migrant workers on long-haul fishing boats. The issue is a blot on the country's otherwise relatively strong human rights record, with reports of punishing work hours as well as verbal and physical abuse at sea. Zhang Ventrius reports.
It's year 2 of a 4-year plan to clean up abuses in Taiwan's deep-sea fishing fleet. Mistreatment of the Southeast Asian migrant workers that keep the fleet running has attracted international attention and threats of sanctions from the U.S. and EU. But while Taiwan's plan addresses issues like wages, NGOs say major questions remain. One is whether the plan does enough to prevent forced labor.
法规仍然允许渔船在海上停留高达10个月的时间哦。相对来讲，国际劳工组织已经把3个月作为强迫劳动的一个警讯。
Restricted internet access for fishers is another issue. Just 98 ships, 10% of Taiwan's distant water fleet, have onboard Wi-Fi. And rights groups say the recommended allowance of 3 hours access per day is not enough. A lack of access to the outside world is something fishers themselves say takes a serious toll on them.
Karena pengalaman selama ini kan, saya pernah juga sampai lebih 10 bulan. Kita juga kadang kalau nggak ada komunikasi itu, fishmandis kita itu benar-benar terganggu. Fisik, mental, dan spiritual kita itu merasa goncang banget.
And then there are concerns about the way checks on ships are outsourced to third parties. NGOs worry ship owners could have their own employees do inspections and have them falsify their findings.
所以这个就是球员兼裁判，这个就是剥削产业链。
Taiwan's fisheries agency says it's grateful for any constructive criticism, but it also stands by what it says its action plan has achieved over the last 2 years. That includes rules about living conditions that it says its agents enforce not just in Taiwan, but in ports overseas.
我们当初就调整提高薪水，从450块美金1个月提高到550块美金。那目前也在持续检讨怎么样再去提升他们的相关待遇。那在整个那个工作时间的部分，因为过去蛮多人批评在台湾的远洋渔船工作时间都是超过正常的工作时间，所以我们要求在船上你必须建立你的工时登记。
But NGOs say they will keep the pressure on the government to ensure Taiwanese fishing operators respect the rights of their crew members. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
It's been 9 months since Japan started releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant that was destroyed by an earthquake and tsunami over a decade ago. So far, radioactivity levels have stayed within accepted international standards. But here in Taiwan, food safety scientists have been keeping a close eye on one substance in particular, tritium. Joy Sun explains.
Chopping up Sarita fish to test for radiation, one of the top food catches in East and Southeast Asia. This Taiwan lab has been ramping up its testing capacity since Japan began releasing wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean last year. The move was approved by the UN's Atomic Energy Agency, but it has resulted in bans on Japanese seafood in some countries and public outcry in others, including here in Taiwan. This is Taiwan's first dedicated lab to test for tritium, a radioactive substance that's dangerous if consumed in large amounts. And unlike other radioactive substances in Fukushima wastewater, tritium cannot be filtered out.
氚这个部分它没办法做去除的动作，它会超过一些国际标准和一个国家标准，所以他们目前的做法就是稀释，那这个氚就变成一个是我们要去关注的何种，因为它的风险比较高。
Tritium can be dangerous when ingested, inhaled, or absorbed in large amounts, increasing the risk of cancer. Tritium limits for drinking water vary between countries, between 740 becquerels per liter to 30,000, a measure of how much radioactivity is there. In Taiwan, the limit is 740. Tritium levels in wastewater from the Fukushima plant are diluted well below Japan's operational limit of 1,500 becquerels per liter. In Taiwan, scientists are keeping a close watch with just 10 becquerels per liter as a mark for further testing.
There's two steps to the testing. The first is to test the water in the fish's body. Now they do that by freeze drying the meat to isolate the water particles. And if the initial results come out to over 10 becquerels per liter, that means there's likely more tritium bound actually to the fish's flesh.
The fish is then burned and dried in this machine, which collects and cools the steam given off, to be tested here, confirming just how much tritium is in the fish. Scientists say this helps with transparency, which is why they also post their results online. But they also note that low levels of tritium occur naturally in the atmosphere, and so reducing levels to zero is not the goal.
氚本来就是存在自然界中，所以你不可能会有零。但我们只能说，就是我们检测到数值都是在法规之下。
With decades to go until all the wastewater is released from Fukushima, scientists here continue to expand testing. They use these high-purity germanium detectors to inspect radioactivity in over 35,000 food items a year. They say their efforts will not only help put the public at ease, but will also help the scientific world better understand possible long-term effects. Patrick Chen, Justin Wu, and Joyce Sen for TaiwanPlus.
The world has been dealt a scorching reality check from the European Union's climate service, with May declared the hottest ever. There have now been 12 months straight of smashed temperature records. Cindy Chi reports.
As scorching heat waves and long droughts plague the globe, it's now been confirmed. Last month was the hottest May on record, completing a string of 12 record-breaking months. According to EU climate service Copernicus, the Earth's average surface temperature reached 15.9 degrees Celsius last month, 1.52 degrees higher than the May average before industrial times. The stark findings prompted UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to call for urgent action.
We cannot accept a future where the rich are protected in air-conditioned bubbles while the rest of humanity is lashed by lethal weather in unlivable lands. We must safeguard people and economies.
Guterres called for slashed emissions, clamping down on fossil fuel industry and the boosting of climate finance over the next 18 months to reverse the impact of global warming. It comes after a year of deadly disasters that have claimed thousands of lives. Brutal heat waves in Asia shriveled crops, forced schools to close, and made everyday life a misery for millions of others. Africa experienced long-lasting droughts, while communities across the world were devastated by floods. Scientists say these events were worsened by global warming, which is exacerbated by the burning of fossil fuels. Most governments have pledged to gradually reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but few are doing at the speed scientists say is needed to avert the devastation. And the future is not looking bright. A separate report from the UN's World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, is predicting an 80% chance the next 5 years will see the average global temperature surpass 1.5-degree target, laid out in the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement.
Is the stark reality that we risk trillions of dollars in economic losses, millions of lives upended, and destruction of fragile and precious ecosystems and the biodiversity that exists there. What is clear is that the Paris Agreement target of 1.5 degrees C is hanging on a thread. It's not yet dead, but it's hanging by a thread.
The WMO also says it's highly likely one of the next 5 years will be 2023 as the world's hottest year on record. UN leaders are renewing calls to advance economies meetings at a G20 summit in Brazil next month to take the lead in minimizing the impact of climate change. And while the tally of record-breaking temperatures will eventually end, the overall trend of dangerous heat and climate disasters may not, unless the world leaders heed the call for change. Devon Tai, Rosie Greninger, and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, check out this newly opened care center for injured koalas in Australia. I'm Ethan Lo. Take care, and I'll see you next time.